Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's cool. We're over here on YouTube, which I've never done before. So, my name is Erin Cotman. I am an instructional leadership coach based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And tonight, I got so many notes over here, y'all. Tonight, we're talking about instructional leadership, but with the lens of how do you make PD work for you, right? If we're being really honest, there's a lot of not great PD happening out in the world, right? And so this PD allows us, PD is like a really great way. It's a form of coaching and development, right? And so when we water down PD, when we don't make it worthwhile, it loses its steam with and motivation with educators. And so we want to make sure that as instructional leaders in our building, we're delivering strong PD. So first thing I want to talk about with you guys, and let me tell you this, let me see if I can show y'all. So these are all my notes, right? As leaders, we have to be so prepped and prepared for any sort of coaching conversation, instructional meeting that we're having, PD, like all of it. And I say that's a good model for teachers as well, because I tell teachers all the time, like, you should have your plans in hand. You should have your notes in hand. Like, the goal is not to memorize everything. The goal is to be able to deliver and facilitate in a way that's effective and impactful for students. So as leaders, we model that. So if you see me looking at my notes, it's because I'm modeling for you the fact that if you have a well meticulous planned out PD, you have notes, you have talking points, you have those reminders of those strategic moments right in your hand. All right, so let's quickly talk about what it means to be an instructional leader, right? So I'm of the belief that if you are in a school, right? If you are a school leader, I don't care if you are a coach, I don't care if you're a dean, I don't care if you're the principal, superintendent, you should be an instructional leader, meaning you should be an instructional expert in your building. Okay. And so what that means is right now there's a lot of principals and leaders, and certain times people are getting promoted for reasons that are not because they're instructional leaders, or they've been out of the classroom so long or out of touch with curriculum that they're no longer seen as an instructional leader. When a teacher has a question in your class, in your building, yes, they have coaches that they can go to, but they should also look to the principal to go to as well, right? That means you're in the trenches with them. You understand the curriculum. You understand, you're able to coach and develop teachers, right? So everything I'm saying today is from the lens of someone who's an instructional leader, okay? All right, so first thing I want to define for us is instructional excellence. And so let's also, we're in a new space over here with YouTube, right? So let's also make sure we talk in this chat, right? So I know normally we're on IG, you can heart and do all the things, but use the chat, right? So I want you to quickly tell me, how would you define instructional excellence, right? So for me, instructional excellence is a leader who is able to coach and develop via content, right? Develop content knowledge in others. One who is able to coach on instructional strategies that work, right? A leader who's able to model data analysis and being able to react to that data, okay? It's a leader whose 75% or more of their calendar reflects direct time spent in things that actually move instructional needles, okay? Right? So those are the types of things that an instructional leader, an instructional expert does, all right? So let's jump in. We're talking about PD, and we're talking what makes strong for PD, what makes for strong PD, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about is, and I'm doing this in the form of a tip and then like implementation, right? Because oftentimes people give us tips, but they don't necessarily tell us how to implement, right? And so this will help us to do that, okay? So the first thing I want us to think through is, you want to make sure that you are diving into what your teachers need. Meaning, are you choosing PD that's just based off of what, right? It needs to be based off of observations, right? It should be based off of data. It should be based off of surveys, right? So you could be surveying your teachers and asking them what sort of PD they also want, right? So it should be based upon what teachers need. And that looks like an implementation. It looks like surveys. It looks like observation data. It looks like, and when we say surveys, that's student data, teacher data, family data, right? Those are all forms of data that you can use to inform what you're giving PD on, right? I think it's super important at the beginning of a year, especially maybe for quarter one. I wouldn't probably do the whole year, right? As a leader, as I'm planning out my priorities for the year, I have to think about the PD that supports those priorities. However, I need to remain flexible in that I may say, okay, this first quarter, I'm going to do 6 PDs every, one a week, and I'm going to have, and these are the topics, right? But as I start implementing parts of that support, if I see that teachers are struggling, I don't move forward, right? I build in support PD. I'll give you a prime example. I have a client here. I'm Atlanta based who is really deep in the science of reading work, right? They had a whole scope, but as they realized, teachers were having a harder time implementing each PD. So what was the push? Slow down, not just keep going, right? Slow down. So while they may have had a huge scope plan for the year, they've had to slow down that scope and that is based upon the observation of what they actually see teachers being able to do and not do, right? So again, you want to have a scope and sequence for PD, but it needs to be flexible, and adjustments should be based and rooted in data. And those could look like observation data. It could look like, so also we inspect what we expect, right? I forget who, I think that's Principal Patterson who always says that, but it's true, right? Like even if you're giving PD on student culture, right? The PD should be based upon the research and data that you have on that topic, right? Or how that's showing up in your school. Okay. So first step is you want to make sure that you are research-based. Okay. Research-based, observation-based in your PD. The second thing I want to make sure that I'm giving home for you guys is that you want to make sure that your PD is differentiated, meaning unless it's something that every single teacher is new to every single teacher in your building, your PD should be differentiated. And honestly, even if it's something new, I would push you to think through learning styles of your teachers, right? This is why as leaders, we have to know our teachers, learning styles, right? Their current strengths, right? If we are focused on strength-based coaching, the way that I teach a new concept to a teacher, if they all have different strengths, I might approach that in a different way, right? So I might group my folks who already do have a really great hold on classroom discussion. I might group them, and how their PD looks on this particular topic may look a little different than a group of teachers who are still struggling to implement really strong classroom discussions, right? So thinking about the same way that you would differentiate for students, the same way that you would differentiate your classroom, your PD should look the same, right? If you are crafting one size fits all PD, That's also why I say oftentimes as an admin team, my admin team collaborated a ton on PD, right? It was very rare that one person was leading PD. Typically, there may be one person who was the lead on PD, but it was like each of us were taking a small group, right? When it was time for practice and implementation, or we were tag teaming a PD. One, right? The way that we each deliver PD is a little different, so I might resonate more with someone else. Two, it's very clear then that this is our team is on the same page, right? This is not one person holding this down. And three, we learn a lot from each other within facilitation, getting to watch and facilitate. So I would say the next thing I want to hone in on is on differentiating your PD, right? That means, y'all, you got to be prepared. Planning PD is hard, right? It's not something that just happens, 2 days, we look at something and 2 days later we're doing PD, right? Now, sometimes you have to be ready to react and move, right? But 9 times out of 10, this should be a thoughtful PD that you are planning out, right? So it should take you a few days to be able to do that. The next thing you want to agree on as an admin team is what is your approach to PD in your building? Meaning, what things, no matter what PD it is, no matter what the topic is, are true about how your school delivers PD. Meaning, at my school, there was always practice. Practice. That practice might look different depending on the topic. So practice could look like taking an upcoming lesson plan and finding a place in your plan to implement whatever instructional strategy we're working on. It could look like physical practice. At the beginning of the year when we were working through routines and systems, it was definitely, hey, let's walk through the transition from the cafeteria right, to our classrooms and make sure that is tight and the route that we're taking and what does that look like, right? So at my school, practice was always a piece there, right? Also at my school was always like, what's the culturally relevant pedagogy connection to this like strategy? So you want to also be on the same page with your entire leadership team about like your approach to professional development as a whole. Because you want there to be a through line, and it's also like the professional expectation that you have of your teachers, right? So my teachers always knew coming into PD, like, well, there's going to be some practice, right? We normalize that. There is, maybe there's also like collaboration is 1,000% part of our PD, right? So you want to think through what are the pieces of PD that are important to your school and that are seen in every single PD that we have. You're building that professional muscle in your teachers. PD should not be sit and get. If a teacher is expecting to come to your PD and just sit, right? That's not PD. That's not PD, right? We want to make sure that it's interactive, okay? All right. Next, let's talk about our next tip, which is, y'all, there's got to be a piece for teacher voice, right? How can you highlight teachers who are doing already maybe doing the instructional strategy that you're working on? How can you highlight teachers to be able to bring their knowledge to the table? You want to always remember and keep in mind the principles of adult learning and how those impact, right, your approach to PD. If you are giving 90% new information in a PD, that's problematic, right? Your learning should be very minimal. The new concept should be very minimal. The rest of the time should be spent in application. Okay. So if I'm looking at PD, right, I should be maybe giving 25% new information. 75% of the rest of that PD time should be spent in application. Okay. In application. Oftentimes we're trying to squeeze so much information to a 60-minute PD and folks don't get to practice. And that's why you're having to go back and do the PD again and again and again. Or that's why you then go into their classroom tomorrow and you don't see the carryover because you haven't given them time to practice and apply it to their actual classroom context. Okay. If this is making sense, drop me something in the comments. If this is like, okay, Erin, I'm with you. I'm picking up what you're putting down. The other really important tip for enhancing your PD is 1,000%. There should be ongoing support. All right. So I just said sometimes we're giving way too much new information, not enough time for application and practice. And then we go into classrooms that next week and we want to see this thing and we're not seeing it. And it's because, one, we provided too much new information at once. It was too chunky, right? And then also because there's no ongoing support, right? Perfect example. So that same, I love a good case study sometimes, right? So this same client that's implementing SOR, signs of reading, one of the things that was really important was to make sure that, so they've gotten the PD. We then made it really clear leaving PD what we wanted to see, right, in the coming week, right? So for example, they were working oral language strategies. So one of the things that they wanted to see was a very specific turn and talk strategy that they were doing, QSSSA, right? And so coaches then had to support that, right? So that meant coaches in their coaching meetings and in their LPCs that coming week were talking with teachers about where they could implement this specific turn and talk strategy, right? It wasn't just PD, hey, next week we're coming to see if you guys can do it. No, right? It was PD supported that next week in lesson planning clinics and in coaching meetings, right? Giving teachers a week to continue to play with it and refine it and work through it, right? And then their leadership team did a walk, right? And was able to gather observation data to know how well is this strategy working in classrooms. And then from there, they decided, okay, we see this part and this part of this strategy working really well. This part's a little fuzzy. So that means next week PD, we're going to zoom in on that piece specifically, right? Now they're also able to support for teachers why they're focusing on what they're focusing on PD because they've got data to show. Teachers don't feel like it's a gotcha because they've been supported along the entire way, right, with implementing a new strategy. So when we say support, it's not enough. PD is, I tell people all the time, is the introduction. It's like the one toe in. You have to support that learning throughout the rest of your coaching systems. So this is also why I'm really big on, yes, you say you're coaching in your school, but how? What systems support that? What meeting spaces support that? What data supports that you actually are coaching and developing versus having a bunch of meetings? And I mean that so nicely, okay? All right. So the other big thing is seamless implementation and ongoing support, right? Across your learning. Okay. And the last tip I have for you on enhancing your PD is making sure that you are summarizing and stamping your learning at the end of PD, that you're summarizing the key points and what is the next step from this PD, right? Is it that, hey, tomorrow I want to see your anchor charts up, right, with X thing? Is it, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just, I want you to continue to marinate and think through what we learned today. And next week, we're going to pick up with XYZ, right? But sometimes we leave PD and we don't really know, just like think about it, like a student's an exit ticket. How do you as the facilitator know whether or not those people with you in PD were with you the entire time? How do you know that they understand what it is that you've taught? How do you know that we're all on the same page on our next steps? Teachers have 1 million things floating in their brains. If we don't really parse out and make clear our next steps based upon that PD, it's going to go to the back of their filing cabinet. It's back, right? Maybe even in the shredder, right? So you've got to make sure that you're really clear and stamping out what it is that you expect to see each and every time at the end of a PD. Zoom out for them. Give them the bigger picture, right? How does this connect to our current priority? How does this connect to data that we have? How will this make your job easier tomorrow? How does this help students learn now, right? Make the connection super clear for them. So at the end of the day, they know the purpose of the PD. Okay. So let's review, right? So one, we're making sure that that our strategies and the learning that we're giving to teachers is differentiated. We're making sure that it's connected to our priorities. If it's not connected to a priority, I don't know why you're doing it, right? We are making sure that we are, I didn't say this one, but leveraging technology. How are you using technology and like latest research? And how does like the latest research support your learning as well, right? So technology, latest research, how do you make sure that what you're showcasing, right, is applicable to their current state in their current classroom? Oftentimes teachers want to see, like I understand you in theory, what does it look like in my classroom? So you as a facilitator have to be able to show that, okay? So it's differentiated as well. There's implementation and ongoing support. If you take nothing else from this video, it's that there is ongoing implementation support. Slow down, right? Also, your PD should be rooted in data. So what data is supporting, what data and observation surveys are supporting the need for this PD. And then it's engaging and collaborative, that you've established as an admin team, what makes our PD different, what connects our PD, right, as a team, what are the expectations of PD, no matter, right? Because this part, that's quality control, right? No matter who's presenting PD on my admin team, as a teacher, I should get quality PD, right? So you've got to establish that. And then there should be a closing, next steps, and some sort of summarizer at the end of your PD. The other thing I want to just quickly end with for instructional leaders specifically, here's what's happening in my world as a facilitator, right? At my school, when I was facilitating or anyone was facilitating, if the whoever wasn't helping on the admin team, guess what they were doing? Giving me feedback as the facilitator. They're doing that so that I can continue to improve as an adult facilitator, right? So we had our own rubric, right? They're giving me feedback on my facilitation. What was clear? What was not clear? What can I do better the next time, right? So no one in that room, everyone in that room should be getting feedback, right? Like the teachers are learning in that moment from the facilitator. The facilitator should be debriefing and getting feedback from the rest of their admin team, right? Like if we are truly serious about instructional leadership and excellence, the people who are leading should be getting feedback. So as a principal, that is a missed opportunity if I am not helping to facilitate and give feedback to the people who are facilitating. Feedback on the facilitation. Okay, feedback on the facilitation. Even as an AP, when I did it for another AP, man, how much more capacity that did for me, right? Because now I'm getting really meta watching someone else deliver PD, and I'm figuring out, what I want to add to my plate for that, what I don't want to do, what I want, right? Like I'm watching someone else facilitate PD, and it's like, wow, okay, I'm able to learn. So as a principal, imagine like the double capacity build that you're getting. You're building capacity in your teachers while also you're building capacity in your APs or coaches or whoever is leading. Okay. So that's when you're really an instructional leader. When you're thinking about what is everyone's experience in the room right now? How's everyone in this room becoming a better instructor or leader? That's when you're in your bag. Okay. That's when you're in your bag. So I'll be back next week. I'm super excited. We're going to do this every Monday for the next couple weeks. Be sure to spread the word. They'll be quick. We're at 20 minutes. Yeah, quick little 20 minutes of really just working through what does it mean to be an instructional leader. Next week, we're going to talk about navigating challenges. And so we're going to talk about, adaptive leadership. But like, what does it look like to actually navigate challenges through the lens of adaptive leadership? Because if we're being honest, everything's not always hunky-dory, right? So when you're navigating a challenge, what's the adaptive leadership skills that you need to pull in? And then per usual, I'm going to connect it to instruction, right? I'm going to connect to an instructional leader, how an instructional leader approaches adaptive leadership skills. So share this, like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys next week.